us in the decision that they take, the elections and everything. Would really like to be active. It's not that we are weak or anything. We just need to be invited to come through, to come and give our opinions and all that. So basically about women empowerment, that's basically what I would say.
The two previous summits were held in Kigali, Rwanda in July 2016 and in Johannesburg, South Africa in mid-2015.
Well, let's get more on this story from a social commentator, Dele Owolowo, who joins us live on the program. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me on.
So what are some of the key issues that you expect to be discussed at the African Union Summit?
The African Union, which is a post-development of the OAU, they still have the same historical perspective, which is to move Africa forward one way or the other. But if you track back through history and what's been achieved, you'll see it's almost repeating the same thing that's been expected. The current one, which has a lot, according to the chairperson, the current chairperson, the outgoing one, Mrs. Zuma, one of our projects, which is to harness demographic dividends and through investment in youth. It's a good, laudable project, but if you look at it critically, investment in youth, for what? You'll find out if I use Field Ruwe, who's a Zambian writer. You'll find out that a lot of the investment in youth is usually for knowledge-based reasons. And in that fact, Nigeria typifies this, and a lot of other African countries. While we're concentrated on youths for knowledge, we really need youths for development, on agric, industrialization, entrepreneurship, things that can happen on ground, even though that's one of the focuses. So I would expect them to tackle issues regarding development and also on humanitarian issues, which is tasking us a lot in Africa. Security issues I expect will be discussed. That's tasking a lot of countries. And also climate, the environment and climate change, where Africa needs to get on board with the world. So these are the issues I expect them to tackle.
Now, 3 African countries have indicated that they'll be leaving the ICC. Do you expect this to come up for discussion and for other African countries to likely follow suit?
It might, for moral grounds, it might come up for discussion, but would they take it serious? What's the point? If we look at it from the moral point of view, you would say it should come up, but from the legal point of view, some people will say those countries that have their rulers taken to The Hague, they think there's a kind of injustice towards African countries, looking at the world economic situation or jurisdiction of the world. If it were, let's say, a country like Russia, are we going to arrest the Russian president? You see that happening? It's not possible. America does something. Are we going to arrest the American president? So in the case of African countries, which is the point some of these African countries raise, that look, this, the application of this rule is skewed against smaller African countries. Even the events in Gambia, could we have done that to a much bigger African nation? It's smaller, okay, so we can apply the rules of law, morality and all that. If we're bigger, can we do this to Zimbabwe? I mean, if we really look at it, you might have a moral justification for it, but can you really carry it out if we're a much bigger political entity? And so it's nice, yes, but morally, yes, they should pursue it, but legally, how far can they get?
Now, talking about Gambia's ex-ruler, Yahya Jammeh. Now, Gambia is one of the countries pulling out of the ICC. Does that mean he walks free, or do you expect calls for his prosecution at the African Union Summit?
Well, one would say, why am I surprised that they are pulling out of it? Who signed it? He signed it, or the current? Well, he signed it. What a lovely legacy. I was just reading recently that when he was leaving, he left with 2 Rolls-Royce and 1 Bentley. This is lovely, and he now signed that he shouldn't be prosecuted, so that his country is out of this. I mean, this gives you the mentality of some of the African rulers. I will rarely use the word leader. Some of the African rulers we have. He has almost bankrupted his country. Definitely was forced out because of the idea of weapons weighed against him, even though I was a little bit scared. The French were not involved. But in this case, if you now call for his prosecution, the fact that he's actually signed to live in the ICC, which is not surprising, but I'm not surprised, but the 3 African countries that are saying this are lining up with him. lining up with him that this has to be done. So I can't really fault what he's done, but morally, I'm against it.
Dele Owolowo, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you, James. Thank you for having me on. Thank you very much.
In other news, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Christine Lagarde, has arrived in the Central African Republic's capital, Bangui, for a 2-day visit to assess the IMF's actions to boost the CAR's economy. The Central African Republic is undergoing an internationally supervised transition involving a constitutional referendum.
Lagarde's 2-day visit to Bangui is the first stage of her African tour that will also take her to Uganda and Mauritius. Upon her arrival, the IMF managing director told the media that she's very pleased to start the year 2017 in the Central African Republic with the mission of listening and understanding in order to better assist in the effort of peace, recovery, economic growth, and of course, reconciliation. The IMF has been, is, and will be a partner of the authorities of the Central African Republic on its road to reconciliation, peace, and the restoration of conditions of growth. Lagarde met with President Touadéra later on the same day. Christine Lagarde spoke to members of the National Assembly where she said the IMF is committed to providing resources, advising and working with fragile countries to develop their capacity to solve their own problems. The visit comes 2 months after the Brussels conference, during which the Central African government received $2 trillion worth of pledges to finance its recovery plan. 6 months ago, the IMF granted Bangui an expanded credit facility of nearly $112 million over 3 years period. According to the IMF, growth in the Central African Republic is 4.5% in 2016, less than expected. But the organization recognized that a number of indicators are positive, notably in terms of reforms. Before flying to Uganda, the second part of her trip to Africa, Christine Lagarde also visited an NGO in charge of orphans and lunched with representatives of women's groups.
Still to come on Network Africa, a UN-run program helps stateless refugees in Chad get new papers. Please stay with us for details.